Welcome to this video. In this video, we shall be taking a look at how to handle forms. We shall look at how to handle text input fields. We shall look at how to handle text areas. We shall also look at how to handle select input fields. And finally, we shall take a look at how to handle checkboxes. Let us dive in. When it comes to handling forms, we have to handle them differently in React. And the reason for that is forms naturally maintain their own state. But in React, we have to update the state using the this.setState method. We can combine the two, where React's state will be the single source of truth. We are also introduced to a concept called controlled components. And a controlled component is basically a component that is controlled by React. On the screen, I have declared a simple form component. We have an input field and a submit button. When we render this on the screen, we can basically see the name, the label, the input, and then the submit button. When we type in the input field, name, we are able to input data in the form field. But how do we get data from the input field using React? And how we do that is we can add a value. I have declared a state called name with a default value of Kelvin. And when we render that, we can see that Kelvin is being rendered in the input field. We can also see a warning. You provided a value, props to a form field without an onChange handler. So that is something that we are going to do next, provide an onChange handler. And to do that is we are listening or handling the onChange event on the input field. I have declared an onChange method, and I'm also doing the binding in the constructor method. If you don't know how to do that, you can watch my previous video on event handling. I explain why this is important or why we do this, especially when working with class components. And the reason why I have an underscore is just to show that it is coming from here for it to be clear, but you can do without the underscore. Even if you leave out the underscore, it will still work fine. But let us leave that in for now. And the warning is gone. But notice one thing. I'm now unable to change the input of the form. As much as I am hitting my keyboard hard, nothing is changing. So to do that, we have to track or update the state in the onChange handler. So to update the state, we have to use the setState method. And I am getting the form value from, I think this is supposed to be value. I am getting the form value from the event. So event basically is tied to the element. And I am pulling out the target, then the value of the target, which is the name. Let us type and see if the state changes. And we can see that the input field is being updated. How do we know that the state is also changing? Let us print out the name state. And we can see Kelvin is being printed. So when we update this, the name input field the paragraph tag is also being updated by the input field state. Awesome. Let us handle the submit. Notice that when I press the submit button, in this area you will see a reload. You can see that it is reloading. And the reason for that is, by default, on form submit, it creates a reload. React generally can be used to create a single page application, and we don't want that behavior. So how do we get the values from the form field but prevent the reloading of the form on submit? Let us look at how to do that next. So I will declare another method called handle submit. I have added the onSubmit event, then added the handle submit handler to handle that event. In the handler, I am preventing the default behavior, and in this case, the default behavior is the reloading of the page. Maybe just to get some more information, let us also log the information from the state in the submit handler method. Console.log this.state.name. So this time round, when I press the submit button, you can see that Kelvin is being logged. So when I do Kelvin codes and submit it, you can also see it is being logged. So at this point, you can take this input field, you can take the value from the state and do an AJAX request to a server and submit the data. So that is how we handle an input field. Let us look at how we handle a text area input. So we can get rid of all this. Hello text area. So this is how we can add default data in a text area field. And when we render that on the screen, also works as expected. Also notice we are receiving a warning. Use the default value prop instead of setting children of text area. Let us use default value and see what happens. So we need to set it to self-close. And no warning, we are getting the text area field and we can continue typing. But the same question that we are also trying to answer at this point is, how do we handle data from the text area? How do we get data from the text area? How do we change the data in the state area so that it is maintained by React state? And to do that, we follow the same method that we did in the name input field. We can use the onChange handler to handle the change. And for the value, we can use the name state. So yes, we can see that the default value of Kelvin is there. And when we submit, we do get the data from the from the onSubmit handler being printed in the console. So that is how we handle text area, similar to the way we handle the text input field. Another type of input field is the select box. So let me just copy paste a simple select input. When we render that on the screen, we do get a simple drop down. Notice with the value of coconut as the default. Awesome. So we can move around the selected, and we can see lime becomes the default. We are also receiving a warning, use default value, which is also interesting. Let us see how we can do that. So on the select tag, we can add the default value, and the value that we need to add is the value in the options. So in this case, let us use lime. And voila, the warning is gone. That is how we can add a default value. So to handle the change events, we can basically follow the same idea that we did with the other form inputs. So we can add an onChange handler. Then for the value, this time round, let me name it as value. So immediately it defaults to the first item in the select box, and we can move around and change it. Let us print the result of the state to determine if it is really changing. So below that, we can have a paragraph tag that renders the state of value. And we can see when we change, it jumps around and prints the value of the select input. The final input field that we shall look at is the checkbox input field. I have declared a simple input element of type checkbox. Then we have checked state, which is going. Then we have an onChange event handler. Notice that we have a default state of going set to false. In the change handler, you can see that we are looking for the checked attribute in the target. Let us see how that happens. So we can check it, and when we do submit, we can see that it is logging the value of true. And when we do uncheck it and submit, it logs the value, or it logs false as expected. So these are some of the form elements that you might be working with when it comes to working with forms in React. There are many fully fledged solutions out there, and when you go through React's documentation, you will see a Formic recommended. It is a fully fledged solution to handle form input, but you need to have a good foundation to understand how forms are handled in React before you can move there. Thank you for watching. If this is the kind of content that you are interested in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And see you in the next episode.